Okay, so in this part of the tutorial we're looking at the template file that I've provided on the phpacademy.org forum. If you haven't downloaded it and you want to use this just to make everything a lot easier and easier to follow, go ahead and download that. And you will download the index.php and the star.css files. Now the index.php is essentially just an HTML document. We have included jQuery in here. If you're not entirely sure about jQuery, it's a library of JavaScript functions, if you like, an easy to use library where we can use cool effects and stuff, and we don't actually have to completely write everything out in JavaScript. So I've included this using script type text JavaScript like you normally do, and then we've specified the latest version of jQuery as a source, remembering to end our script tag here. I've also left a script type equals text JavaScript area here where we can write out our code that's going to process the input of our text area. So if we go down a bit, you can see that we've got this div container which is outlined in style.css. Again, if you don't understand this, probably best that you do before you start looking at things like this. We have more importantly an input type here. So we've got an input field of text. We have an ID of URL, which is very important because we're going to be using this to reference when we press a key down or we click the shorten button. We have an event called onKeyDown, and what this essentially does is it checks if the enter or the return button on your keyboard has been pressed using this condition here. If it has, we're going to call a function here that's going to process our URL. If we come along, we have a button, the value shorten, that's just what's displayed to the user, and on click we're going to call exactly the same function as in here. Now I'm just going to take a minute to tell you the reason that I've done this. Now when the user comes over to the web page and wants to type something in, we're not actually processing this to another page, so we're not specifying an action in a form tag. What we're in fact doing is we're calling a JavaScript function which is going to utilize jQuery, and it's going to pass the variables that are contained within this text area. So let's just go over back to here. So when we click shorten or when we press enter, remember we have this on key down function, we're checking the return key's been pressed, and then we're processing a function here or calling a function. And then if we click the button, we're also processing or calling the same function. So we can either press enter while we're typing, which is obviously more convenient to a user, or we're clicking the shorten button. So you can see either way it works. There we are. So that's that to do with the form field and the button. We're going to obviously be creating the function later on just up here in our script area. We also have this div ID equals message, which is really important. We've called this div message. This is directly below our text area and our button, which is here essentially, and we're going to be putting either error messages or the confirmation message into this once we've actually clicked the button. So that's all going to be done in our function that we're going to eventually call go. We have a copyright div here, which is not really important, but there it is, just so you can see where we're working with. So we've got that here. Okay, so the very first thing that we want to do is establish what's going to happen when we click the button, because obviously we need the user to be able to type something in and then actually process this. So let me just go over to my FTP client and upload all these blank files. Before you start, you might want to, obviously you have these two files, create a file called db.inc.php, url.php, func.inc.php, and you'll need an htaccess file which starts with a dot. So it doesn't actually have a file name, it has a file extension, and this is processed by your web server, and it will eventually allow us to just use a / and the codes that we're generating. So over in index.php, we need to work out what we want to do if we press a key down. So we already have this check here. I haven't included this in the tutorial because it's irrelevant. But inside these brackets, as long as this condition is met, we want to call a function called go. So we simply put go, brackets, and a line terminator. Now this is not PHP, this is JavaScript, so we're dealing with JavaScript here. As well as on click, so when we click the button, we also want to call this go function. So now let's go ahead and go to the top of our page and let's outline this function. So inside of our script area, I'm going to say function go. Now it's going to take one parameter, which is the URL that's been typed into the text field. So I'm going to go through this slowly, and if you don't understand it, you'll see exactly how everything's working. So I'm going to take the URL that's been passed. So I'm just simply going to be putting URL in there. So we're going to pass a URL to this function go, and then we're going to be processing something here. So just for now, for the purposes of testing, I'm going to write alert and then URL. So whatever we put into this function, we're going to alert out to the screen. Obviously we're just testing, it would be useless if we were actually doing this. So I'm going to type in here test, or no, I'm going to say enter pressed, and here I'm going to say button clicked. So if the button is clicked, we're going to say go button click. We're passing this value to the function. And then if we click or press enter rather, we're going to go, and I'm going to say enter press. So we can see the difference between the two. So let's go ahead and upload that file. Let's go back over to our browser and refresh. So let's type well, we don't really need to type anything in here. If we click the shorten button, we see button clicked. So that's past the fact that we've pressed the button to this go function. If I click in here and press enter, you can see it says enter pressed. So as long as that's working, we know that we have actually created the function properly and we've called it properly from either clicking or pressing enter. Really important that you do it in stages to ensure that you actually, you might later on think, oh, it's a jQuery error, but in actual fact it might be a very fundamental error, such as not calling a function properly, etc, etc. So the next thing we're going to do is inside, well, we're going to delete these first because it's useless as it stands. We need to take the value of this URL area. So we need to take the value of this field and actually pass it. So we're still up here, let's go ahead up here, we're still going to alert out the URL, but this time we're going to make it dynamic, so whatever we type in, it's going to alert us. So let's go down and come over here. So this here is for the return key press, and this is for the button click. So let's go ahead and inside of here we can use jQuery to pick up the value of the URL field. So obviously the URL field is called URL. We've identified it as URL. So we can simply go in here and type $, then in brackets we want to specify the name of the URL field. So we're going to say URL. Now we well, let's come over here. We need to then type in .val and brackets. Okay, so we're just taking the value of the URL field. Okay, so upon enter, that's going to do that. So what we can do is we can copy this and we can paste it directly into there. Let's go over to the FTP client, upload that file, refresh. Now let's type something in here. So I'm just going to type test and I'm going to press enter. Oh, it says undefined. Okay, so let's go back over to our code, and yeah, we're going to need to stick a hash in front of that and then a hash in front of there.